Today I'm talking with Fred Maher, who we were going to find out about all of his drumming that he did with Material, and before that they were called Zoo Band, and how Giorgio Gomelsky got Fred and the other members of Zoo Band to meet, and what happened to Zoo Band after they finished recording their first album, Temporary Music 1, and then become Material. Fred, how you doing?
I'm all right.
So it's been a while since the Zoo Band was playing together. What was about
Sure has.
a little over 40 years ago?
Yeah.
So in those days, you were, I believe you were in high school.
Yeah, or I had just dropped out or something.
And
I think I was still in high school.
yeah, because you would have been, what, about 14?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're living in northern Manhattan Island?
Upper West Side. Yeah.
Upper West Side, okay. So at that age, what kind of music exploration were you doing in New York City?
Well, I was listening to a lot of progressive music. I was sort of too young to be going out to shows or anything. Most of my exposure to the New York downtown scene was after the Zoo Band formed, and we would play or go to shows probably together, so that was my exposure to.
So you're mostly listening to records and going to record stores, and
Yes.
I see. And had you been to any concerts for any of the bands that you were buying the records from?
I think I went to an Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert at some point.
All right.
Need to remember that it was like when they were touring with an orchestra or something, and then I remember seeing Yes at a show in, I think it was Jersey City, New Jersey, and I think I was literally in the last row, way up in the nosebleed section of this kind of outdoor. I don't know what it was. Was it like a baseball field or something kind of like that?
So you're already playing drums at this point. In fact, you must have been playing drums for a little while, because you were already in a band. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in playing the drums and how you end up in this band 1121?
Well, let's see. Interest in playing drums. My parents wanted me to take music lessons of some kind. When I was much younger, I had some violin lessons, but the lessons were the same time as Batman, and I really preferred watching Batman to violin lessons. And then, so I gave up the violin for Batman. And then at some point, I think I remember there was a music school uptown from where I lived. I lived on 71st Street, and the music school was kind of like in the 90s or in the 90s or somewhere uptown, maybe closer to Columbia University. And I remember at that time, I actually was trying to decide between saxophone and drums. And the drum lessons, if I'm recalling correctly, the drum lessons were Friday afternoon, and the saxophone lessons were Saturday morning. And the Saturday morning saxophone lessons would have interfered with my watching of cartoons or whatever it was that was on television. So I chose drums, And yeah, that's how I got into that. And then I took some I did lessons there, and then I did some private lessons, but I just wanted to like rock out and wasn't really that into the lessons. So at some point I quit taking lessons and just sort of taught myself. I used to play records in my bedroom and play drums along with the records.
So when do you
And
meet the guys from 1121, and how does that happen?
that's high school. That is, I think, like 9th and 10th grade or somewhere around there.
And how long have you been playing drums at that point?
Not very long, but yeah, not that long. I don't think I was very good at the time. But we had dreams of everybody was into sort of progressive rock, and so we sort of had like a kind of progressive rock feel to us. This was, of course, very out of fashion at the time. Punk is exploding, and you know, progressive rock is being left in the dust. But we didn't care. We loved it.
So while you're in this band 1121, you meet up with Michael Beinhorn and Martin Beese. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you remember meeting them, and who came first?
I can't, you know, I'm not sure who came first, whether it was Martin or, because I know that a couple of the members of 1121 lived on the Upper East Side. So that was the more sort of posh part of town. And it was through those guys that I met Martin, because Martin was kind of one of the gang of those, you know, he was a cohort, so to speak. Yeah, so it was Jeff Adams was kind of the main guy in 1121. He played guitar, and James Hellman was the bass player, and Michael was in the band for a minute, I think, maybe one rehearsal. And there was a guy named Steve Colicchio who played like piano and keyboards and stuff. We only ever played one show though, so I don't know if it counts. We played one show at our high school of Art and Design.
So how is it that the three of you end up bonding out of that?
Wow, I'm not sure. Just the sort of love of the same kind of music, and we all had, you know, girlfriends that knew each other. We just became a sort of a unit.
At some point, Michael moves in with Martin.
Yeah, I kind of vaguely remember that. I guess if it's Martin's apartment on the Upper East Side, or whether Martin moves. Is that when did Michael know whether he moved in with Martin in Brooklyn or?
No, actually, I'm not sure. I think there may have been a little of both.
Right.
I think Martin was transitioning at that point from that apartment to you know, to Brooklyn. So yeah, I'm not sure how long that lasted, their roommate situation, but right around that time, maybe not too long after they become roommates, you and Michael apparently have been would go on these excursions to your favorite record store, and that record store was Fantasia, and it moved downtown. Right. So now you had to go downtown to visit your record store. Can you tell me a little bit about those excursions?
Well, yeah, there were some. I think there was I thought there were two Fantasia locations. One was way uptown, like Washington Heights, Manhattan, somewhere around there, and the one down on, I'm pretty sure it was on Second Avenue.
Okay.
And there were other record stores on Second Avenue that we'd go to, but Pantasia was the main one, and Pantasia is where we saw the flyer for Zoo, and I think it said, looking for musicians, artists, poets, or some, maybe that, or maybe it just said musicians, and then it just gave had a huge list of bands like that were, referenced as, sort of inspiration, or to explain the style of whatever it was that Zoo was.
Right.
So
Do you
yeah, we saw that.
Remember any of the bands that were listed?
I definitely remember Kraftwerk was on there. Probably like Van de Graaff Generator, maybe King Crimson, probably King Crimson. More the sort of more, I don't remember things like Emerson, Lake and Palmer or Yes being
Right.
on, because those are probably considered too commercial for at the time. Let's see, Hawkwind, stuff like that, maybe Gentle Giant.
Well, as we know now, one of the guys behind that flyer was Giorgio Gomelsky.
That's right.
And it's going to be his place in New York that you're going to go have this meeting based on this information you got in the flyer. Now, Giorgio was involved prior to this with bands like Magma and Soft Machine. Do you remember if any of those were listed on the flyer?
Yes, that sounds about right. Magma and Soft Machine were probably almost definitely on that flyer.
And then, of course, you're going to soon meet David Allen from Gong, so perhaps Gong was mentioned as well.
I think Gong was probably on there. That makes sense.
Yeah. So you're looking at this flyer, and you and Michael are getting all excited. How do you contact them, or what happens next?
Well, I guess there was a phone number, and I called the number, and one way or another, I'm pretty sure Michael and I went there together, to the location on, I think it was 24th Street, in the sort of Chelsea area of Manhattan. And that's where we met Giorgio and Bill Laswell.
So do you have any memories of what that place was like where you met, and were there other people there?
Not in the beginning, there weren't other people there. I mean, at one point, I think Bill was living there, and it was like a pretty industrial space. There wasn't any machinery or anything in it, but it was just very sort of barren. There was the first floor, which I believe had very high ceilings, and then there was a basement also that was what you might call a finished basement, meaning it wasn't just concrete. It was like carpeted and had some kind of wall treatments and stuff, and that's where we would eventually do most of our rehearsals.
Oh, I see. So before you start rehearsing, you're having this meeting. What do you remember what you talked about at this initial meeting, and how it is that you guys hit it? Obviously, you hit it off well.
Yeah. Rick, I tell you, I don't recall. I mean, my vague memory is Giorgio being Giorgio, getting very excited and sort of gesticulating and probably telling us that we're going to change the world. And he was always very.
You didn't know who he was, I assume, at that point.
No, I did. I think I I think I did know who he was
Oh,
because I think he had producer credits on a few of the records that Michael and I would have been listening to. I think, was he not a producer on one of the Gong albums, one or two of
yes,
the
he
Gong?
was. I think a
Yeah.
couple of them. Yeah.
So we definitely knew him from that.
Uh-huh.
Um, I didn't know. I didn't. Yeah, I get maybe I'm trying to remember if we knew that Giorgio was going to be there before we went there, or whether we discovered that when we got there.
Yeah, Michael said you didn't know.
Okay.
You weren't expecting to meet him, and yeah, it sounded like it was you really didn't know what to expect when you went to this meeting.
No.
Of course, the other guy is Bill Laswell,
Yes.
and he's also fairly new to the New York scene at this point. So I'm sure you didn't know who he was, but um, between Giorgio and Bill Laswell, who did? I guess Giorgio probably did most of the talking. Do you remember what Bill mentioned, or how, I mean, you hit it off with Bill too, so something must have gone well.
Yeah, I don't recall. I mean, but Bill's a pretty, as you imagine, I think correctly, that Giorgio did a lot of the talking. Bill was kind of quiet. But yeah,
Well, so Bill being the bass player and you being the eventual drummer, does this topic come up during the conversations that that I mean, you must tell them you're a drummer, Michael's playing synth,
mhm,
something like this. You tell them about 1121, maybe what you're doing
maybe.
with that, maybe. And does Bill ask you anything about your drumming?
I don't remember. I
Hmm.
don't think so.
Huh.
I
And
think
do you do any playing at all in this first meeting?
I don't I don't think so, but I don't remember it. I mean, at some point we got to playing together,
Right.
and then of course at some point Cliff Coltrari also enters the picture
And
there.
Michael said he worked at Pantasia,
That's right. Yes.
and because of that, he knew a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah, but he eventually, yeah, he sort of joins the uh the nascent band.
Uh-huh. So pretty soon after this meeting, you guys are having rehearsals at that Gomelsky house.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember anything about those initial rehearsals?
Probably just sort of they were probably just sort of jams.
Yeah.
There was no structure, no songs.
What did you think about these other musicians?
Well, Bill was was and is an amazing bass player, like really, really gifted. A much better musician than either Michael and I were.
Uh,
um, I felt fortunate to be playing with somebody that was that good. But it's one of those things, like when you're playing with somebody that's better than you, it kind of rubs off. You get inspired.
right. Um, so not too long after this meeting, there are plans being put together for this big festival. It's going to be a 12-hour long festival of progressive avant-garde music.
Mhm.
And I know Gomelsky has plans to bring some of the European avant-garde to
Mhm.
this festival. And the band that you're now rehearsing with is going to be one of the featured acts.
Yes.
So so now you're rehearsing, and this festival is coming up. Um, how do these rehearsals go, and how do you start putting together tunes?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the the show was probably the reason to begin composing stuff, for the show. And the only thing I remember is we did a cover. We did a cover of I Don't Know What by I Don't Know Who. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a cover of some sort of jazz track. Um, but I don't recall what it was.
Do you know that there are some recordings of the festival?
I just learned that I kind of took a look at the website.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's surprising. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you should. It's amazing that, first of all, that those recordings got saved because Giorgio had just put them away in a box for 40 years.
Yeah.
And then that they were able to, get some reasonable digitizing off of those 40-year-old tapes. So
Yeah.
definitely worth a listen, especially for you. I mean, that's probably gonna really to take you down memory lane there.
Yeah.
So the build up to the festival, can you tell me a little about what that was like? I mean, and also you're meeting more and more people because the festival is a gathering point.
Yes.
David
So
Allen, David
yeah,
Allen comes over. One of the guys from Magma comes over. What was that like for you?
that was really exciting. We were kind of meeting our heroes. Yeah, Chris Cutler comes over and everybody's sort of gathering around and hanging out at the zoo house. And people are rehearsing. Bands are being put together. And yeah, it was a very exciting time. And I was drafted by a guy named Yashko Sefer to play drums with him. He was crazy. He pushed me really hard. He wanted me to play a drum solo, and I hate doing drum solos. But he insisted that I do one, and that was a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like you learned a lot about drumming in a very short period of time here, kind of like being thrown into the fire almost.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Did it make you nervous?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I was very nervous.
So tell me about Festival Day. Do you have any recollections of what that actual day was like for you?
It was a long day. It was a very long day.
It's been described as chaotic. Pretty much everybody agrees that it was chaotic.
Yeah. I'm sure other than actually playing the show, I have memories of just being, there the whole time, helping out and helping get set up and helping people get on stage and get off stage and stuff like that.
So there was a lot of volunteer help, it seems, for this festival. Would you describe it as I mean, and it's coming on the back end of this punk movement, and the no wave scene is really starting to blossom, or
yes.
has blossomed in New York. This is October of '78 we're talking about.
Right.
And I believe Brian Eno's No New York album has already come out, probably.
Is that right?
I think so. I think it came out earlier in '78. Pretty sure.
Huh.
So Gomelsky,
yes.
Gomelsky and Eno are both in New York in '78, kind of for the same reason. They're looking for talent in a way. They're looking for the new thing.
Yes. Boy, No New York was that was an important record. It's like one of those really important records that people don't know about. Yeah, it's funny how I remember loving all of that stuff, and of course we were huge Eno fans. But our music wasn't like No Wave, or at least it wasn't in the beginning. Yeah, it was a great time in New York for sure.
Well, there's also this other new music coming onto the scene at this time, which is hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what Bill Laswell gets really influenced by too. So you guys are mashing up all this stuff. And yeah, you're probably a little more groovy than a lot of the no wave bands. But
Right. Yes. Yes. I was a particular fan of James Chance and the Contortions. They were probably one of my favorites. And we would go, I mean, I would go see all these bands at CBGB's and Hurrah. It was like CBGB's, Hurrah, and Mud Club were the main places. Max's Kansas City was also still going at that point. In fact, I saw James Chance and the Contortions at Max's Kansas City. And yeah, so we were, although our music wasn't anything like that stuff, I really loved it. I was really enjoying it.
sure. And by now you're 15 years old, so you're probably having no trouble getting into these clubs, right?
Right.
All right. The Zoo Manifestival was over 12 hours long. And it's you were playing in Zoo Band and any other bands?
Well, Yachko Suffer.
Yeah, that's right. You said
played with, and I don't think anything else. No.
Okay, but you're helping out with the other bands with logistics and things.
Yeah.
Now the festival has goes overtime, and did you stay for the whole thing?
I think I did. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm told the story that the people who ran that theater space got a little, well, there was you went beyond the time. The festival went beyond the time that was originally allocated, and they lost patience and turned the lights off and eventually shut down the power.
Right.
In the middle of, I think in the middle of, David Allen was a headliner, right? So do you remember anything about that?
I now that you mention it, I do remember it getting shut down, and it going over, of course, makes perfect sense. I'm surprised that David Allen was on that late at night. I would have thought we would have more of a sort of primetime slot for him, because he was one of the big draws.
Yeah, I'm not certain that it was him, although one of the stories is that after the power got cut, David Allen invited the audience members up onto the stage to play anything they could acoustically. Do you remember that?
That sounds about right. Yeah. Vague memory of that.
So any memories on how the concert actually ended? I mean, your audience participation is happening. The power's been cut. Did you guys like spill out into the street, or did you guys end up going anywhere afterwards?
Probably Veselka.
What's that?
There was a restaurant called Veselka.
Oh.
There were, on Second Avenue, there were a lot of like sort of Eastern European restaurants that served like pierogies, which are kind of these sort of savory ravioli type things, Eastern European, Polish in origin. And those restaurants, I think those restaurants were open 24/7.
The festival brought over these musicians that were part of this progressive avant-garde scene from Europe, and now they're mixing with the New York scene. What would you say was the impact of the festival going forward after it was over, in terms of how on the audience and on the musicians that were in the New York scene at this time?
Yeah, on the audience, I couldn't say, but I mean, a lot of there were several of them that came over for the show and eventually decided to make New York their home. David Allen, for sure, Fred Frith, maybe maybe a few others. I don't recall, but Fred Frith and David Allen, I recall, sort of
Yeah.
just becoming New Yorkers.
Yeah, and then the Giorgio wants to take at least part of the festival on the road.
That's right.
So how does that come about, and what was the organization like?
Organization. I can't believe we actually pulled it off. That we actually went out, played, and came back alive. It was, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I'm 16 at this point. And again, for some reason, my parents let me do this. I had to agree to get my high school general equivalency diploma upon return, which I did.
Did your parents talk to Giorgio at all?
I don't think so. No.
They just took your word for it.
Yeah, I just took my word for it, I guess. Maybe they talked to Giorgio. I can't remember.
All right. And you guys are going to be traveling in a makeshift school bus. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh my God, yeah. Somehow somebody got a school bus and we tore a bunch of seats out of the back and built like a loft bed. So there was like a bottom bed and a top bed. And somehow the guys, me and Bill and Michael and Cliff, commandeered the top bed. And that was our spot. But I mean, geez, I remember going through snow with that thing, and then going through I remember when we were approaching Los Angeles, like stopping to get gas, and I'd probably been asleep for hours and hours, and stepping outside into extreme like desert heat, and almost being stabbed by a giant cactus or succulent of some kind. Yeah, I mean, it was, and of course the bus broke down probably a couple of times, at least a couple of times. I recall pushing the bus to get the bus started or to a service station of some kind. And it was mostly Julie Smythe's boyfriend, whose name escapes me, and bandmate, who was driving for most of the time. And so I'm lucky I didn't know how to drive, so I didn't get my.
Yeah, did you have a license?
Being a true New Yorker, I never get my first car until I was like 30. And then learned how to drive then. So yeah, it was quite a hulking vehicle.
And yeah, you take that from New York to LA and back, and I forget exactly how many. I have an itinerary of that tour.
Oh, really? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'll bring that up. But you did more than a dozen shows, I think. And there's a great distances between the cities for these shows.
Yes.
You probably don't get to spend a lot of time in each city. But do you remember, any of these cities, what the audience was like, or any particular incidents that you recall?
I think the audiences were always pretty excited. I don't remember how big they were. I mean, they were different sizes depending on the location. I remember we played somewhere in Arizona, We played in a pretty big theater in Los Angeles, and I think the attendance was pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's a brief video clip of that show
wow,
on YouTube.
holy moly!
And it mostly features David Allen and Don Davis, the man in white. He was dressed in white. It seems like for that whole tour.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, and you probably maybe you won't remember this, but when you guys finish this tour, you go to record your first EP, and Don comes in to play on one song on that
Oh
EP.
yeah.
Do you remember the name of that song?
Uh, no, I don't. So this would be our second record, which we did somewhere outside of Philadelphia. Uh,
No, this was on the first one.
oh, on the first record.
Yeah, the one that you did up in Woodstock.
Oh, okay.
So Don gets asked to come in to add sax on one song. The song is called White Man.
Oh, right, White Man.
So my question to any of you that were there was the name of the song because of Don wearing white the whole tour?
No, I don't think so. I think it was more of a sort of political
Right.
statement of some kind.
Yep. It's an interesting coincidence, though.
It is.
All right. Well, so speaking of this recording, you get back from this tour. You guys must be exhausted. You've got a handful of tunes now that 4 of them you want to record.
Mm-hmm.
When do you first hear about the recording session?
I'm not sure. I just remember Giorgio telling us that his old friend Eddie Offord has a place up in Woodstock, and that we've been invited to record there.
Uh-huh. And so the 4 songs that you record there, how well worked out were they before you got there?
I think they were pretty well worked out because those are the ones if I'm not mistaken, those are the ones that we played on the tour.
Uh-huh. All right. So had you been up to the Woodstock area before?
I don't think so. I think that was my first time.
Had you been outside of Manhattan much
Not much.
before that tour?
Not too much. I had an aunt and uncle that lived on Long Island, and I would spend my summers like out on Long Island,
Uh-huh.
in a town called Port Jefferson. But I was kind of very provincial for growing up in like one of the biggest cities in the world. There was plenty to keep me occupied.
So up in Woodstock, you're at the studio of Levon Helm from the band,
Mm-hmm.
and Eddie Offord is the engineer, and Giorgio Gomelsky is producing. Tell us what those sessions were like.
I was nervous. I don't think I'd ever been seriously recorded before. And I remember there was one super bonus was that they had a Prophet 5 synthesizer there, which was like one of the first polyphonic synths. And Michael and I were both very excited about it. Michael played it. It wasn't a traditional recording studio. There weren't like recording booths. It was just a large open space.
Yeah, I think it was called The Barn.
Was it? Yeah, it was just a large open space, and there was no control room. There was just a console, and everything there was a console and a tape machine, and the tape machine was some kind of custom tape machine because it was much smaller than your usual like 24 track tape machine. I think it was 24, maybe 16 track, but I think it was 24 track. So everything fit into road cases. So it was kind of a mobile studio, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I've read some documentation that this was the same mobile studio that Eddie Offord created to record Yes when they were on tour. And I've also read that he used that mobile studio pretty much for all the recording that he did after that, because that's the way he liked to work. You know, he was set up with you in the main room, right?
Yeah.
And that, you know, obviously that gives a different feel for the engineer, and he's also acting as producer in many cases anyway. But here, Giorgio Gomelsky is producing. What's he doing?
Well, I don't know what he was doing. I know he made food, and but as you say, everything was, as we talked about before, everything was, the songs were pretty much worked out. There wasn't a whole lot of like, you know, interpretation or production that we were going to do.
So you're recording them live? Everybody's playing their parts at the same time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think we did some overdubs also, but for the most part, I think, yeah, they were just live takes.
Any problems with the drum track?
How
How about getting the drum sound? Because that's always a big issue.
Yeah, no, there was no problem. I mean, we felt like we were in good hands at Eddie's place, so we didn't. I don't recall like recording and listening back and critiquing the sounds of the drums or anything like that.
Well, the album sounds really good. So either you guys got really lucky or you really were in good hands. So what happens after those sessions are over, as far as you're still called Zoo Band at that point?
Yeah, I guess we are. But we have the name Material by the time the record comes out.
Right.
And so, yeah, as you pointed out, it came out on Zoo Records.
Right.
Probably the only Zoo record. I don't know if there are any others.
But you also end up touring France, like not too long after you record the record.
Right, with David Allen.
Yeah. So the record must get released when you get back from France, or do you remember?
I'm trying to recall. We recorded a New York Gong album with David Allen. David Allen had a house in Woodstock, and he had some recording equipment. I don't recall what it was, but we recorded an album at his house. And what I'm trying to remember is which came first, New York Gong the album or New York Gong the tour. I'm going to say it's album then tour, because Michael didn't go on that tour because Michael and David had like a falling out,
right,
while we were making the album, and Michael just left and hitchhiked his way back to New York City.
Oh wow. Yeah, well, that's unfortunate.
With synthesizer under his arm.
Yes, and that nixed him from the France tour, I guess.
Yeah,
but you got to go, and George Cartwright was drafted as the sax player. Do you remember who else went on that tour?
I'm trying to remember if Cliff went on that tour. Cliff might have been on that tour.
Martin went because apparently he could speak fluent French.
Oh, really?
Yes. I don't know if that's why he went, but and there was some back and forth between the French promoters and Giorgio about if he should go or not. But ultimately he did go, and I would think that him being fluent in French would have been a big plus.
Definitely, yeah.
But of course, and George goes and hooks up with Laswell, I guess, for the first time on that tour, and ends up forming Curlew later.
Right.
And what did you think of France? Obviously, your first time there, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I was super excited to go. We started out in Paris, and we were staying at the guy who put the tour together was a guy named George Laton, and I think we stayed at his place for a few nights. Yeah, I was loving France. I thought it was really cool. I was surprised by some of the toilets that were just a hole in the ground back then. I don't know if they still have those anywhere in France. The food, I think I was confused by it more than anything, because as you know, the French take their food very seriously.
So how was the French audience compared to the American audience on the tour?
Comparing them, I'm not sure, but I remember the French audiences being pretty excited, pretty good,
What were the venues like in France compared to North America?
I think they were bigger.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because Gong was much more of a known commodity in France.
Right. Yeah, David Allen had lived there for quite a while.
Yeah, so I think they considered Gong like kind of one of their own.
Right.
Yeah, the audiences were great. Went to a lot of cities. See, went to Lyon, Grenoble. No, that's a different tour in my head. For some reason I spent an inordinate amount of time in France. I later did a tour with Rhys Chatham and Carol Armitage had a piece called Drastic Classicism. We did a European tour. That's when I was in Grenoble. But yeah, a bunch of cities: Montpellier, Clermont-Ferrand, Rennes.
How was the Paris show? I imagine that would have been a big one.
That was great, except they misprinted the poster for the show. It said New Jerk Gong.
Maybe David Allen had pissed someone off.
Maybe.
So Zoo Band becomes Material, and everybody in Material goes on to bigger and pretty big things in the music business, including yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on this time with the Zoo Band, how would you say how would you say it impacted your career?
Oh, well, I mean, it was the launch pad for sure. I got to you know, I got a education from it that is, you know, education through experience, that was great, and very you know, formative, touring, recording, learning recording techniques from the various people that we worked with, Eddie Offord, and later when we recorded an album, sorry, an EP in just outside of Philadelphia, which I mentioned before.
Mhm.
I mean, it was a great launch pad. I got to do everything. I got to understand the studio and learn how the studio worked. Of course, later Material had their own studio in Brooklyn with Martin. And I really got to get my hands on everything, you know, from the console, the tape machine, to microphone placement and choice and stuff like that. So it was a great education.
Sure.
Yeah.
And apparently for all of you that were in the band, because at least 3 of the 4 of you become music producers. Why do you think that is?
um, I just think it's probably it's like it seemed like a logical progression, from what we were doing, because we were eventually we were self-producing and making our records the way, you know, exactly the way we wanted to. And, you know, at least for me, Brian Eno was my hero. And when I used to look at all the different records that were some of my favorites, I kept seeing his name popping up on all these records. And I thought, well, what is that guy doing? I want to do that. So
Yeah.
he was kind of my hero, and we eventually got to work with him. It was amazing.
Yeah. Fred, I really want to thank you for spending time with me and
Sure.
telling us about all these experiences that you had at such a very young age. So now that we've been talking about it for an hour or so, did anything else come to mind that you might want to mention about this experience and Zoo Band, or maybe how you ended up breaking away from Gomelsky?
No, I don't. I'm trying to remember what the reason was for breaking away from Gomelsky. I don't think there was an incident or anything. I think we were just rebelling.
Uh-huh. I see. Well, that kind of makes sense. I thought maybe it would have something to do with a gradual loss of confidence in the organization, or the lack thereof.
Yeah, there was no organization.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, Fred, thank you very much for talking with me. And yeah, I look forward to speaking with you again.
Okay, Rick.